What's up, everybody? Welcome back, Corey Used Bloody History. Well, today we're going to go ahead and continue on with Ruth Paine's, the John Armstrong Ruth Paine file. Some interesting stuff in here. Obviously, what we're learning is that Ruth Paine isn't who she says she is. So this brings us to a file, obviously. Starts off in the middle. I hate when they do this. John Armstrong did this. He compiled all this stuff and just left out the stuff that wasn't important to him. So this one picks up in the middle of a sentence. It says, she has previously related when she was in the garage looking for a part of June's baby bed and saw something wrapped up in a blanket. She undid the package enough to pull back the corner of the blanket. She noticed that the article in the blanket was Oswald's rifle. She said that she does not recall actually seeing this rifle again until it was exhibited to her by the commission investigating the assassination of the president during her interrogation in Washington. Marina calls that there were 2 duffel bags left in the station wagon by her and Mrs. Ruth Paine when they were unloading the station wagon following their trip from New Orleans. She does not know who moved these duffel bags from the station wagon to the garage, but presumed it was either Michael or Ruth Paine. She said she was pregnant and did not pick up any heavy things. Marina classified Ruth Paine as a very talkative person and one whom you could not tell a secret because she could not keep the secret. She said Ruth Paine was not the type of person to whom you would tell things to. She said she never had told Ruth Paine or Michael Paine that Oswald owned a rifle. She does not believe that Oswald ever told her either of the Paines that he owned a rifle. She does not believe that either of the Paines knew Oswald had a rifle, although she's not positive of this. She advised she is well aware that Mrs. Paine frequently made notations on her calendar about appointments, events, and other items. She stated that she knows nothing about Mrs. Paine making a notation on her calendar, such as October 23rd, Lee Harvey Oswald purchase of rifle. All right, so this notation on the fucking calendar is like slam dunk proof that Ruth Paine is in on this setup, because Oswald never ordered the rifle, right? So somebody told her that he ordered the rifle, and someone told her to mark it on the calendar. Okay, that simple. She said she does not know what this notation means, nor does she recall having seen it on Mrs. Paine's calendar. She never talked to Mrs. Paine about Oswald's ownership of the rifle. Marina was questioned concerning any target practice that Oswald may have engaged in with his rifle. Next document, 12463, Mr. Barry Cohen appeared voluntarily at the Dallas office of the FBI, advised his telephone number was EM1-7570. Cohen is a member of the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, and is presently attending the University of Texas, working on his master's degree in Russian history. Cohen, who is very active in the ACLU, advised that he has been discussing with Mr. looks like Greg Olds, home phone 8010841, about Lee Harvey Oswald's joining the ACLU. Oswald picked up a blank membership and mailed the membership with $2 fee to the national headquarters of ACLU in New York. Approximately 1 month prior to the president's assassination, Oswald attended a meeting of the ACLU, but Cohen was not at this meeting. Cohen started an investigation to determine why Oswald attended this meeting and found that a Mrs. Paine, with whom Oswald's wife was residing, invited Oswald as her guest to this meeting. So sometime in late October, Oswald attended a meeting of the ACLU at the request of Mrs. Paine. Mrs. Sylvia Hoke, 5421 Juanita Road, advised that she is the wife of John L. Hoke, 5421 Juanita Road, Bethesda, Maryland. Mrs. Hoke also stated that she is the sister of Ruth Paine, Irving, Texas. Said that the telephone call from the Paine residence to her telephone in Bethesda, Maryland, exchange OL 61990, June 20th, would have been a call from Mrs. Paine to her 10-year-old son, Franklin Hoke, to congratulate him on his birthday on that date. Mrs. Hoke said that she does not know and has never met Lee Harvey Oswald. She also advised that she has prior contact with bureau agents from the Washington field office concerning this case. Next one, 12-1263 FBI document. Dr. Frank C. Counsel, 801 West Randall Mill Road, advised that he has treated Mrs. Michael Paine, 2515 West 5th Street, Irving, Texas, and delivered to her 2 babies, one in 59 and one in 1961. Dr. Counsel stated that he did not recall ever seeing Michael Paine, but may have talked to him on the telephone. Dr. Counsel stated that he did not know Lee Harvey Oswald or his wife, Marina. He stated that about August of 61, Mrs. Paine called him and asked if she could take a patient, name not recalled, but whom Dr. Counsel now believes was Mrs. Oswald. And this person would be a charity patient. Dr. Counsel said he held Mrs. Paine at the Arlington Memorial Hospital, which he is authorized, did not take charity patients and referred Mrs. Paine to Parkland Memorial. Dr. Counsel stated that though doctor-patient relationship is only the acquaintanceship he has had with Mrs. Michael Paine. All right, so it looks like this next page is a motor vehicle report, EE2930, 55 Oldsmobile, four-door, registered to George K. Stevenson. It was at the Ruth Paine house on, looks like 12/5 of 63 at 12 noon. Next one, December 2nd, 1963, Mrs. Emmett Diamond, 309 Southwest 5th Street, apartment 13, advised that she is acquainted with Ruth Paine of Irving, Texas. Mrs. Diamond, also known as Bonnie Diamond, stated that she's known Ruth Paine and her family for many years. She said that Ruth's maiden name was Ruth Hyde, and that the Hyde family formerly rented a house from hers in Columbus, Ohio. Mrs. Diamond stated that Ruth's brother, Carl Hyde, is a doctor in Yellow Springs, Ohio. She stated that he was a conscientious objector during World War II. She advised that Ruth Paine has a sister, Sylvia Hoke, who was married to John Hoke, and they reside at 5421 Wanetter Road, Glen Echoes Heights, Washington. She stated that Sylvia was formerly employed by the Department of Defense and that John Hoke is currently employed by a government agency called the National Aid for Undeveloped Countries, CIA. She advised that Ruth's parents are separated and that Ruth's mother, Carol Hyde, is currently taking a course at Oberlin College and resides at 4400 Glenmore in Columbus, Ohio. Mrs. Diamond advised that Ruth's father, Bill Hyde, resides at 580 North Park Street, Columbus, Ohio. Mrs. Diamond advised that the last time she saw Ruth Paine was approximately 1 month ago, at which time Ruth visited her for an hour or so. When Ruth left, she indicated, and it cuts off there. Great job, John Armstrong. He's got a whole bunch of fucking seemingly irrelevant articles pumped in here that I'm not going to read. All right, we have a little miniature article here. JFK plot doubted by Irving woman. A Texas woman subpoenaed by the Orleans Parish Grand Jury said Thursday she doesn't believe Lee Harvey Oswald decided to shoot the president until the day before the assassination. Miss Ruth Paine of Irving told newsmen in New Orleans. She does not believe there could have been a conspiracy because I honestly believe Oswald did not make up his mind to shoot the president until the day before. Miami Police Chief Walter Headley Thursday said his get tough policies have led to a 62% decrease in crime in the city. I don't know if that last sentence has to do with anything, but... All right, next document starts on page 2. Lovely. Number 18 by Tell to Director in Dallas, St. Louis, advised this date that the military file for Michael Ralph Paine, serial number 511-6974-349, reflects Paine was inducted July 15, 1952, but refused to take the oath of allegiance and was honorably released from active duty April 28, 1954. He refused to take the oath of allegiance. Huh. That's interesting. The file contains an unsigned, undated will making his brother, Cameron Paine, executor, with his relatives being reflected as Ruth Forbes Young, mother, and Arthur M. Young, stepfather. Both of these 3-5 East 75th Street, New York, New York. Paine is described as a male, born June 25, 1928, New York, New York. Numbers 19 and 20. See teletype from Dallas, December 4 instant. Attention Assistant Director Sullivan, setting out results of interview with Marina Oswald, December 4. Number 24, on December 4 instant, Mr. Gus Folk, American Jewish Committee, Dallas, advised S.A. James Hosty that Lee Harvey Oswald attended a meeting of the American Civil, and it cuts off Civil Liberties Union, I'm sure. All right, next one looks like CIA documentation, but it's kind of hard to tell. Maybe just a letter. Memorandum to Mr. Sullivan, re. Michael Paine and Ruth Hyde Paine, the Paine residence in Irving, Texas, where they remained until November 22nd, 1963. Oswald visited his family on weekends at Irving, Texas. Oswald paid none of the expenses connected with his wife's stay at the Paine home. In conversations with Mrs. Paine, Oswald claimed to be a Marxist, but she considered him to be a little odd and nothing further. She did not think he was a very logical person, but at no time did he ever give any indication to her that he would commit a violent act such as killing a person. She claimed her friendship with Oswald was based on her fondness for Mrs. Oswald. Bureau files contain information that the April 26, 1958 issue of the Friends Journal, a Quaker weekly, published by the Friends Publishing Corporation, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, reported that young Friends have made a final plan for a 6-week summer visit of 4 Russians to the United States. The article stated that 6 Americans will travel with the Russians by automobile, and their plans include contact with friends, visits to industry, farms, and schools, as well as visits to areas of public interest to the Soviet young people. The article identified the members of the planning group. Among them was the name Ruth Hyde Paine. Ruth Paine's brother, Dr. Carl Hyde, Yellow Springs, Ohio, was investigated by the Bureau in 1953 as a conscientious objector. He based his objections on religious convictions. Persons interviewed during that investigation advised that Carl D. Hyde was a Quaker, and they were convinced of his sincerity in claiming to be a conscientious objector. Ruth Paine's sister, Sylvia Ludlow Hyde Hoke, born 10/2/29 at New York City, was the subject of a security of government employee investigation, 56 to 57. At that time, she was employed as a personal research technician, U.S. Air Force. She resigned prior to security determination being made. She was reportedly pregnant at the time of resignation. That investigation was predicated on information that a telephone call had been made 12/23/55 from residence telephone of Dorothy Wilson, who admitted to an informant she was Communist Party between 46 and 48, and to the information that Sylvia Hoke's mother, Carol E. Hyde, had admitted to neighbors she was a communist. In an interview by Office of Special Investigations, Air Force 12556, Sylvia advised that Dorothy Wilson associated with her mother-in-law, Helen Hoke Watts, in the publishing business, and that Wilson had assisted in editing a book authored by Sylvia's husband, John Hoke, and Helen Hoke Watts. Sylvia denied having any social contacts with, and it cuts off, I'm sure they meant Oswald. All right, next one, report of John R. Weinberg, December 17th, 1963, Office, Philadelphia. Ruth Hyde Paine, date of birth 9/3/32. New York City, attended summer sessions, 1957, University of Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, and studied Russian. Confidential informant advised Ruth Hyde Paine, member of Young Friends Movement of Philadelphia, who were interested in relaxing East-West tensions. As a result, got in contact with Lee Harvey Oswald through pen pal activity. At Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on December 16th, 63, Maud Tracy, Alumni Record Office, University of Pennsylvania, advised S.A. William Smits. Her records reflected Ruth Hyde, 1308 Pine Street, Philadelphia. Parent William Hyde. Date of birth September 3rd, 32, New York City. Attended the summer session at the University of Pennsylvania in 57. Her course taken was Elementary Russian, a 6-week course with 6 credit hours. She received a mark grade of B. On December 16, 63, Maureen Paris, Secretary, Russian Language Department, University of Pennsylvania, advised that there was now no one in this department who had been there in 57, and she had no information regarding Ruth Hyde Paine. Ms. Paris advised Vladimir Sakovic, presently instructor at Mount Holyoke, was chairman of the Russian department. It looks like we already read through this one in the previous episode. Nothing really new here. Memorandum, this one looks like CIA, but let me see if I can figure that out. To Mr. Bellamy, I forget who Bellamy, was Bellamy FBI or was Bellamy CIA, I forget. Dated December 1863 from can't tell, Rusk maybe. President's Commission, assassination of the president. Mr. J. Lee Rankin was contacted yesterday at his office at 4 o'clock p.m., at which time he was furnished 5 complete sets of reports and exhibits prepared by the Bureau. Mr. Rankin was most appreciative of receiving these copies and stated that For the time being, this would be a sufficient number, and if he desired more, he would also advise. During the contact with Rankin, he advised that the commission had met previous day and that a number of items had come to light wherein clarification was needed. These items are set forth hereinafter. Rankin requested information as to whether or not the Bureau had obtained the medical reports concerning the shooting of the president from Parkland Hospital in Dallas, as well as the report from U.S. Naval Hospital Bethesda. This is one of the items which Rankin mentioned on the telephone on 12/17/63 when he contacted the Bureau. It was again pointed out to Mr. Rankin that our investigative reports would cover in detail the results of the medical examination at the Parkland Hospital. Rankin was advised that the family of the president had requested the report from the U.S. Naval Hospital at Bethesda be kept as confidential as possible, and for this reason, the Bureau did not obtain the medical report for inclusion in the investigative report prepared by the Bureau. He was also told that this report was in the possession of the Secret Service. Rankin stated that it would not be necessary to do anything on this, and that in the event the Secret Service did not supply the medical report with the material to be furnished by the Secret Service, the Commission would request the medical report from Secret Service. Mr. Rankin indicated that the Commission desired that income tax returns dating back in 1955 he obtained relative to Lee Harvey Oswald, Jack Ruby, his brother Earl Ruby, Mr. Michael Paine and Mrs. Ruth Paine. Paine residence is the one in Irving, Texas, where Mrs. Oswald and her children were residing. Rankin indicated the commission was interested in the tax returns so that the determination could be made of any collaboration of any kind between Oswald and Ruby, as well as the Paine family, and that they were desirous of having all negative information as well as positive. Memorandum to Mr. Belmont. Mr. Rankin inquired whether information would be available covering investigation that had been conducted in Mexico concerning Oswald's activities, and whether or not there was any necessity for the commission attempting to obtain any information from the Mexican government. Mr. Rankin was advised that this matter would be checked into, and he would be advised as soon as possible. Concerning films, Mr. Rankin mentioned that Mr. Larson of Time Life magazine had offered to make available to the President's Commission the film in possession of Life relative to the shooting of the president. Mr. Rankin decided to know whether the Bureau had copies of this film and if it could be made available to the President's Commission. Mr. Rankin was advised that the Bureau did have this particular film along with other films relating to the assassination of the president, and that he would be advised later as to what film was actually available. All right, so let's cover this really quickly. Obviously, the fucking CIA couldn't just swoop in and get the fucking Zapruder film. So what'd they do? Instead of law enforcement subpoenaing that fucking film, the CIA had fucking C.D. Jackson of Buchenwald fame go into fucking Dealey Plaza or wherever the fuck and meet with Abraham Zapruder and get the film from him. Of course, we know that C.D. Jackson then funneled the film to fucking CIA a day before it allegedly got there, thanks to Dino Brugioni. We know that he worked on the Zapruder film on Saturday, when the official story says the film didn't show up till Sunday. So, fuck C.D. Jackson, fuck the CIA. This is fucking bullshit. Fuck these people. Mr. Rankin stated he did not know if it would be possible for the Bureau to arrange for a type of reenactment of the assassination of the president, but that he felt it would be of invaluable aid to the commission if, through photographs, diagrams, or other arrangements, the commission would be able to sit down and be briefed as to what actually occurred in a more or less chronological story of events which took place, and then have made available the more important items of evidence that had been discovered. Mr. Rankin was advised that his request was thoroughly understood and that this matter would be looked into, and he would be advised later as to what action could be taken. In this connection, aerial photographs have been depicted the scene where the president was assassinated, as well as other important points of activity in Dallas. It's also noted that the Bureau's exhibits section at the present time, is in the process of making three-dimensional exhibits which would completely portray the activities which occurred in Dallas. It is believed that when these exhibits are completed, they would be the most helpful in assisting the commission to see exactly what events transpired in Dallas relative to the assassination of the president. Mr. Rankin indicated that he presumed it would be letters for members of the commission to come to the Bureau for such a briefing if this could be arranged, and that he would not hesitate to ask the members of the commission to come to the Bureau for this briefing rather than have the Bureau personnel come to the headquarters of the commission. During the interview, Mr. Rankin was asked whether or not the commission intended to hire investigators. It was pointed out to Mr. Rankin that the Bureau was desirous of being of any assistance they could possibly render, and that it would be glad to conduct further inquiries concerning any matters that the Commission desired. Mr. Rankin stated that he was most appreciative of this offer on the part of the Bureau, and that he personally felt that the Bureau would only be too glad to cooperate on any request the Commission might have. All right, I skipped over a couple duplicate documents they had stuffed in here. But next one of relevance, report of John R. Weinberg, December 17, 1963, titled Ruth Hyde Paine. Character, internal security, -R, R means restricted. Synopsis, Ruth A. Hyde, date of birth 9/3/32, New York City. Attended a summer session, 1957, University of Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, and studied Russian. Confidential informant advised Ruth Hyde Paine, member of Young Friends Movement of Philadelphia, who were interested in relaxing East-West tensions, and as a result got in contact with Lee Harvey Oswald's family through pen pal activity. Details at Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. On December 16, 1963, Maud Tracy, Alumni Record Office, University of Pennsylvania, advised S.A. William Smits her records reflected that Ruth A. Hyde, 1308 Pine Street, Philadelphia 7, Pennsylvania. Parent William A. Hyde, Columbus, Ohio, date of birth September 3rd, 32, New York City, attended the summer session at University of Pennsylvania in 57. Her course taken was elementary Russian, a 6-week course with 6 credit hours. She received a mark of grade B. Kind of weird how she only took one course on Russian, 6 years before the assassination for 6 weeks, and she was able to write fluent letters and stuff. Wild. All right, something cuts off here. Starts with advised that there was now no one in the department who had been there in 57. This is another duplicate. We've seen this document multiple times already in this stack of documents. Next one. Changed in parentheses and says Ruth Hyde Paine, a.k.a. Ruth Hyde, or Mrs. Michael Ralph Paine, Ruth A. Hyde. Title is marked with a change to reflect the additional name of Ruth A. Hyde, which subject used at University of Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. So why would she use the name of Ruth A. Hyde? What does the A stand for, huh? Reference report of James Hosty, dated 12/11/63. Information regarding Oswald's possible attendance at Antioch College, Yellow Springs, Ohio. This should be interesting. Sergeant Donald Swartz, Intelligence Unit, Columbus, Ohio Police Department, advised November 29th, 1963. He had received the following unverified information from a source he declined to identify. Lee Harvey Oswald allegedly attended Antioch College, Yellow Springs, Ohio, using his true name for a short period of time in 1957, and was dismissed because he was unable to prove his graduation from high school. Oswald had lived care of Michael Paine and wife Ruth Paine, nee Hyde, Irving, Texas. Ruth Hyde is a graduate class of 55 of Antioch College. Her parents were identified as William A. Hyde and Carol E. Hyde. Schwartz stated his inquiries at Columbus show William A. Hyde, actuary, Farm Bureau, now nationwide, insurance company, gives an address in Columbus. A divorce was granted to William A. Hyde from Carol E. Hyde, Franklin County, Columbus 61. The couple had 3 children not identified. A bunch of previous addresses. Ruth Paine, nee Hyde, reportedly has a brother, Carl D. Hyde, date of birth 12/30/37, residing at 125 East Davis, Yellow Springs, Ohio. He is a doctor at Dayton Hospital, Dayton, Ohio, and is married to Lorena. He previously resided at 1198 Selden, Detroit, Michigan. Sergeant Schwartz furnished the above information to Robert Mahler. All right. So that's an interesting one, right? Why is it alleged that Lee Harvey Oswald attended Antioch College in 1957? Let me screenshot this. I don't know how much veracity is going to be to that. Let me see. What would he have been doing in 57? He would have graduated from high school by then. Or did he drop out of high school? I forget. You know something? I should fucking know that. What a dumb thing not to know. Holy shit. That's a question. Did Oswald drop out of school or did he graduate high school? I think he dropped out of school. Interesting how he would end up at a college in Antioch, Ohio. Henry B. Hyde, question mark. This is handwritten on the next page. Old CIA man, World War II. And he's a New York attorney now. Henry B. Hyde. Interesting. Sorry, I'm just skimming these documents. It seems to be more duplicate documents. Information on Oswald in Ohio doesn't seem to correspond with anything I can think of. I'll have to dig into that. What was Oswald doing in 57? Could he have been trying to attend a college? It doesn't really seem to make much sense. All right, next we have an article. It says, wreckage of U-2 plane found in Gulf of Mexico. Empty cockpit leaves faint hope pilot survived. U.S. doubts Cuban attack. Key West, Florida, November 21st. The wreckage of a United States U-2 plane was found today at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico. Its cockpit was empty, keeping alive a faint hope that the pilot, Captain Joe G. Hyde, Jr., might somehow have survived the crash. The high-flying reconnaissance aircraft, presumably returning from a mission over communist Cuba, vanished suddenly from radar scopes at 10:32 a.m. yesterday, about 40 miles north of Key West and 180 miles north of the Cuban coast. It was there that debris was sighted this morning by the searching Coast Guard cutter Nemesis. By 11:30 a.m., divers from the Navy salvage vessels Petrel and Shrike were on the wreckage in 100-foot deep water. They confirmed that the pilot was not in the cockpit. Mother retains hope. At LaGrange, Georgia, Captain Hyde's home, his mother clung to the belief that her 33-year-old her much-decorated son was living somewhere. As Navy and Coast Guard planes and vessels searched for the pilot, a Navy spokesman said, "I don't hold out much hope for him." During the morning, a rumor circulated that a parachute had been sighted, but the Navy denied it. Both the Defense Department in Washington and Strategic Air Command headquarters at Omaha said that there was no evidence that the U-2, a one-man plane that flies at heights of more than 75,000 feet, had met with hostile action over Cuba. The Strategic Air Command said it appeared that a mechanical failure had brought the craft down from the stratosphere in which it operates. They have a picture here of Captain Joe G. Hyde, Jr., pilot of the lost U-2 airplane. So, is there a relation between Ruth Hyde and Joe G. Hyde, Jr.? That's the question. It doesn't really indicate here. At the Pentagon, the theory of an accident seemed generally accepted. The theory was supported by the fact that the plane was out of range of Cuban aircraft. What year? Hold on, what fucking year is this? Holy shit. This is November 22nd, 1963. This is the date of the newspaper article. November 22nd, 1963, the date that the president got killed. Looks like this map here was just found. It looks like just northwest of Key West. It was noted that the ejection seat was not found with the fuselage. This could mean that either Captain Hyde fired the ejection charge and was blown clear of the falling plane, or the seat was torn away at the time of impact. The plane belonged to the 4080th Strategic Wing at Davis Monthan Air Force Base near Tucson, Arizona. However, the far-ranging U-2s frequently operate from alternate bases. Why the fuck would the U-2 be operating over America in 1963? You cunts. You want to explain that? The Air Force would not say from what field Captain Hyde's U-2 took off. The U-2, virtually a sailplane with a powerful engine that boosts it to high altitudes, broke spectacularly into the news in May of 1960 when Francis Gary Powers was shot down over the Soviet Union. Premier Khrushchev demanding an apology for such spy, I can't read that word, from President Dwight D. Eisenhower, and boycotted a scheduled summit conference of the United States, the Soviet Union, Britain, France, in Paris. Mr. Powers was imprisoned for 21 months until Moscow released him in an exchange for Colonel Rudolph I. Abel, a Soviet spy convicted in the United States. It was a U-2 that first confirmed the presence of Soviet missiles in Cuba and brought on the United States-Soviet showdown last year that threatened the world with nuclear war. One U-2 piloted by Major Rudolph Anderson Jr. of Greenville, South Carolina, was shot down over Cuba, the only known American fatality of that crisis. Communist China asserted early this month that it had shot down a Chinese nationalist U-2 near Shanghai. At least 9 of the planes have crashed in the United States. Interesting, huh? November 22nd, 1963, Joe G. Hyde, U-2 pilot. Now, is there a connection here, or is this just John Armstrong's paranoid way of thinking? All right, as we have Commission's Exhibit 290. Looks like part of an article, not an entire article, but looks like one page of one. Marina wondered if he was unbalanced. Okay, remember, Marina's in on the setup the whole time, right? So this article seems to pick up mid-sentence, so we'll pick it up from where it begins. Something returned home. Must be Oswald returned home. He told her that he had fired a rifle, shot at former Major General Edwin A. Walker, a leader of ultra-conservative groups. Okay, so remember, we know exactly who shot at Walker's house, right? It was Lawrence Howard, accompanied by William Seymour, right? 2 men there. The whole thing with, Kirk Coleman. Don't want to have to get into it here. But no, Oswald never had nothing to do with that. He never had the rifle. He never had anything to do with the Walker. So therefore, Marina is a lying fucking cunt. Okay? Marina asked Lee why he had done it. He said that Walker was an extremist who deserved to die. All that's fabricated. She made all that up, or she was told to say that. She secreted the note in a cookbook and warned him that she would show it to the police if he ever did anything similar. She was beginning to wonder if her husband was unbalanced. In mid-April, according to the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, an organization sympathetic to Cuban Premier Fidel Castro, Oswald wrote a letter to the organization's headquarters in New York. It read, in part, "Since I am unemployed, I stood yesterday for the first time in my life with a placard around my neck, passing out Fair Play for Cuba pamphlets, etc. I had only 15 or so. In 40 minutes, they were all gone. I was cursed as well as praised by some. My homemade placard said, 'Hands off Cuba, Viva Fidel.' I now ask for 40 or 50 more of the fine basic pamphlets." Nonsense. Total fiction. Vincent Theodore Lee, national director of the committee, said that someone in the office apparently sent Oswald 50 or more pieces of literature because there was a notation on the letter which said sent for 1963. I don't recall that at all, and I read thoroughly through Vincent Lee's testimony. About April 24th, Mrs. Paine visited the Oswalds. I discovered that Lee's bags were packed. Marina, who is nothing more than a simple family girl who believes in family ties, suggested that Lee go to his birthplace, New Orleans, to look for work. Lee had agreed, but he was insisting that Marina go back to Russia. I felt sorry for her. She was pregnant. She had no other economic alternative. So I offered to let her stay with me for a few weeks until Lee found work in New Orleans. They agreed on this. As far as I know, the idea of returning to Russia never came up between them again. In New Orleans, Lee was hired at $1.50 an hour machine oiler at William B. Riley Company, a coffee processing company. He took a $65 a month apartment. His landlady was Mrs. J.J. Garner. Recalled that Oswald was unpleasant as well as unusual, with a penchant for putting his trash in the neighbor's garbage cans. All right, so let me remind you, all Oswald's jobs were CIA contractor jobs. William B. Riley was a CIA guy who went on to become a CIA front job, person. Then he goes to work for Jaggers Child Stovall, another CIA contractor. Then he goes to work for the Book Depository, obviously a series of CIA contractors. Every fucking job Oswald had was CIA contractors. So, it's ridiculous. She said that twice Oswald put "Leave Cuba Alone" signs on the porch screen in front of the house. Nonsense. And both times she asked him to take them down. The second time she sent her husband, taxi driver Jesse James Garner, to talk to him. I went over and told him to take the sign down, Garner said. And Oswald said, "Who objects to it?" And I said, "I object to it." So we took it down. Mr. Garner regarded Oswald as quiet and intelligent. He also noticed that he had a military manner about him, walked very erect, looked straight ahead, never paid attention to anyone. Oswald obtained a library card at the Napoleon branch of the city library. The first book checked out was Portrait of a Revolutionary, Mao Zedong. Then The Berlin Wall, The Huey Long Murder Case, a biography of President Kennedy entitled Portrait of a President. This book was later found to have Fair Play for Cuba Committee in New Orleans, Louisiana, stamped on its flyleaf. The long book dealt with the assassination of the Louisiana senator. He also took out What We Must Know About Communism, Russia Under Khrushchev, Brave New World, and Ape and Essence by Aldous Huxley, Ian Fleming's Goldfinger, Moonraker, Thunderball, and From Russia with Love. Lee lost his job at the coffee company on July 19th. For the second time in 3 months, he was fired. One of his superiors explained he simply wasn't doing the job. Oswald had begun collecting $33 a week in unemployment compensation when he was fired from his Dallas job in April. The check stopped when he went to work in New Orleans. After he lost his job, he reinstated his claim to compensation in Texas, even though he was not living in the state. The payments started again. On May 26, 2 weeks and 2 days after he went to work as a machinery oiler, Oswald wrote his second letter to the Fair Play for Cuba Committee in New York. He was anxious to become more active and requested for formal membership in your organization. Nonsense. Pure nonsense. It was all Kerry Thornley. He decided to stir things up by approaching an anti-Castro Cuban exile leader in New Orleans and offering to help. Carlos Bernier, New Orleans delegate of the Miami-based Cuban Student Directorate, encountered Oswald about August 5th. Bernier, a lawyer who fled from Cuba in 1961, said Oswald came into the store and he manages to introduce himself as an ex-Marine and said he felt that he had training to fight Castro. He asked for information about the directorate and gave Bernier his guidebook for Marines, which includes instructions in guerrilla tactics. Bernier rejected his offer of aid but kept the guidebook, which had the name Private Lee H. Oswald inside the cover. I'm sure, I bet he did. Okay, so that incident was never Oswald, okay? I'm convinced that was Kerry Thornley who met with Bernier to set the whole thing up, and then Oswald was on the street, blindsided by the incident, and he felt blindsided by it, okay? That's why when he got to jail, he requested to talk to an FBI agent, so they could be like, what the fuck's going on? I'm out here doing my job, and I got other people fucking with me? What the hell? That is what the goddamn interview... That's why he requested an FBI agent come and talk to him when he was in jail, because he didn't know what the fuck had gone on. He didn't know if his cover was busted. He didn't know what the fuck was happening. That's the only thing that makes any sense whatsoever. And why he was so adamant about seeing an FBI guy. Because if being in jail could have blown his fucking cover, well, actually calling for an FBI agent would have blown his cover too, right? Bernier rejected his offer, but kept the book. But frankly, I thought he might be an agent from the FBI or CIA trying to find out what we were up to, Bernier said. On August 9th, 4 days later, Bernier said he was told by another Cuban that the man was on Canal Street distributing communist propaganda, which said, Viva Fidel and hands off Cuba. I went down there, found out it was the same guy who had come up to see me. He tried to shake hands with me, but I refused, and I called him a traitor. We started arguing. A crowd gathered to watch us. I told him, you see, this fellow is a communist. He wants to do to your country what he's done to us in Cuba. The Americans started shouting at him. I grabbed his propaganda and threw it on the sidewalk. I was so angry, I wanted to hit him. At first, he had his hands up. Then he dropped them and said, okay, Carlos, go ahead and hit me. I knew then he wanted to attack me. He wanted me to attack him so he would be a martyr, so I didn't strike him. Oswald was arrested on the grounds of disturbing the peace, and he was eventually fined $10. In late September, Oswald left New Orleans for the last time and made the 7-day trip to Mexico City. Bullshit. He applied at the Cuban consulate there for a transit visa to the Soviet Union and would permit him to travel to Cuba. His request was for himself only. When the consulate said it could not grant the visa, Oswald went to the Soviet embassy. which told him his request would have to be submitted to Russia and that it might take 3 months. Oswald stayed a few more days and on October 3rd returned to Dallas. Lee called his wife at my home on Friday, said Mrs. Paine. We were a little put out with him because Marina hadn't heard from him in 2 weeks. He said he had left his home in New Orleans, dropped by Houston looking for a job, then returned to Dallas. He said he'd been in Dallas a few days before calling. He didn't mention his trip to Mexico. Lee hitchhiked to Irving, the Dallas suburb where Marina was now staying with Mrs. Paine, and spent the weekend with his family. Before he returned to the city on Monday, Mrs. Paine gave him a map of Dallas. You need one when you're looking for a job. On Monday, October 14th, he presented himself to Mrs. A.C. Johnson, who ran a rooming house at 1026 North Beckley. In the Oak Cliff section of Dallas, she told him that she had a room and the rent was $8 a week payable in advance. Miss Johnson asked for the name of the relative in case of emergency. And then it cuts off there. All right, next page. Let me see. DL39. Looks like a receipt for a room, a registration card for Ruth Paine. In Texas, she used her normal address. Is there a date on it? 9/23/63. Okay, so let's talk about 9/23/63. Oswald is said to have last been seen at his apartment on 9/24/63. Ruth Paine goes and picks up Marina on 9/23 the day before. There's nobody really knows where Oswald is on the 25th. There's no incidents of him doing anything on the 25th. But on the 26th, he's allegedly crossing over the border into Mexico. But he's not, because he's still in New Orleans, where he closes out his P.O. box on the 26th of September. The forwarding address he left was the Paine's residence. Okay? So let me sidetrack you for a minute. When he left the forwarding address in late September, he left the address of the Paines. When he applied for his job at the Texas School Book Depository on October 15th, despite the fact that he allegedly moved into 1026 North Beckley on the 14th, he gave them the address of 2515 West 5th in Irving. That was the Paine's residence. Oswald didn't put 1026 North Beckley on anything, ever. Not once. Because he didn't live there. Carrie Thornley did, in this big elaborate setup. So Carrie Thornley goes to Mexico and then he meets up with Marina, who drives, and they drive to Alice, Texas. They're seen at the radio station and at the diner and by about a dozen people. And then they make their way back to Dallas, at which time, at this point, it's now the fourth or fifth? No, it's probably the 6th or so, because on the 7th, Carrie Thornley will register with Mary Bledsoe at what the fuck was that address? Not the 1026 North Beckley. It was the 621. Oh, what the fuck? Not Magazine Street. Well, whatever the other address was, right? And he's there allegedly till the weekend, and then he moves out of there, and then allegedly on the 14th he moves into 1026 North Beckley. But none of that's fucking Oswald. That's all Carrie Thornley the whole time. So that's how you know that Ruth Paine is so full of shit about a lot of the things that Marina was doing, because she has to have known Carrie Thornley without fucking question. Next page, 3264. It says, there was observed on the afternoon of February 28th, 64, parked at 2515 West 5th Street, Irving, Texas, which is the residence of Miss Ruth Paine, a 1955 Chevrolet four-door, two-tone green station wagon bearing 1963 Texas license NK4041, which automobile was identified by Mrs. Paine as belonging to her. It's actually blue. It's kind of like a weird blue, a seafoam green or something, but it's actually more of a blue color. Oh, how fucking convenient is this? Oh my God, this is awesome. I've been looking for something like this for actually a fucking long while. Now this is Ruth Paine's interpretation. We've got here Commission's Exhibit number 2124, I guess it's labeled. FBI document dated 11/28/63. Mrs. Ruth Paine, 2515 West 5th, furnished the following information regarding the day-by-day location of Lee Harvey Oswald. Now we've got about 6 pages of Oswald's timeline, as per Ruth Paine. And we're going to pick this up first thing tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow with more of John Armstrong's file on Ruth Paine, where we'll continue with Oswald's timeline. Thanks, everybody.